Good day, everyone. Comic Boom here with my friend Jason from the Weird Science Get Fresh crew. We are finally back for an indie comic review week. Jason, how's it going?
Going fantastic, Rocky. How are you this fine afternoon?
Well, it is a fine afternoon. It's a family day weekend for me. It's a beautiful day here. The snow is finally melting, and I can't wait to enjoy the day after this. It's only noon here. I know it's 2:00 where you're at, but it's noon here, so I'll be able to enjoy the day. Hit some hockey games later, and nice. It's going to be. I planned on. I might even sip a little bit of whiskey later. You never know. Ooh. Even though I said I was going to drink. I've actually been doing pretty good. I've been getting up at like 6:30 every morning, working out for half hour. Lowering my sugar intake. That I'm actually so far. Middle of February and my New Year's resolution, I've actually been able to maintain most of them. I'm actually impressed myself. So, yeah.
Very nice. Very exciting. I'm slightly overdressed today because I'm right off of teaching this morning. So I just taught some teenagers how to do scientific notation. And I figured, this is at least as important a topic as that. So I should stay dressed up.
Yeah. And, that's a good segue. I'm not dressed up, although I am wearing a Top Gun volleyball shirt. You can't see it all, but it came in the mail. I love Top Gun, and so I ordered a bunch of things for my brother too. His birthday's coming up. He doesn't watch my comic book review, so he's not. I didn't
no spoiler then.
But yeah. But in any event, it's funny. You're a teacher, and one thing I love about comic books and what I love about the indie market right now, and we're going to be reviewing 5 indie comics today: Where Monsters Lie, Immortal Sergeant, Nightclub, White Saviour, Art Brut, and we'll give more details when we get to it. But I love how the big two are kind of suffering now, DC and Marvel generally. I've been generally disappointed. I think most people are. It's kind of they're on a downturn somewhat creatively. At least that's the way I feel. That's the general sentiment.
Yeah, and on both of them, you can find little pockets of creativity, little things like Stargirl or I like some of the things going on over in the X-Men side of the universe. But yeah, there's a lot you got to sift through to find the nuggets of gold.
Yeah, and I think that, and I'm curious as your comments, just generally about these 5 comics we're reviewing. I love the fact that there's little pearls of wisdom in all of them. As crazy as they are, whether it's a horror, whether it's vampires, whether it's dealing with art or samurai nonsense or an immortal sergeant, man retiring with an attitude and kind of miserable. But there's themes there, and they say something. They give life lessons a little bit, and I love being able to find gems in the most crazy ideas, and that's what I love so much about the indie market.
For sure, and that I love that when you open up a new #1 indie, you have so little idea where it might go. I mean, sure, you got a cover, you got some clue, maybe you read the solicit, but, with DC or Marvel, it's going to be a superhero book, right? It may be a little bit tilted this way, a little bit tilted that way, but, it's a pretty narrow channel you're passing through. Whereas indie, it can be anything, it can go anywhere, it can be a long running, can be a one-shot, it could go completely off the rails, and that's what's fun about it.
Yeah, I agree. And with that, let's get started. Our first comic we're going to be looking at is Where Monsters Lie. Writer is Kyle Starks. I believe the artist is Petri Kowalski. And I
think I'd go with Pyotr, kind of like Colossus.
Pyotr.
It's a Russian name, Peter, yeah.
Yeah, Peter. Okay, well, I stand corrected. Because if it's one thing you can rely on Comic Boom for, as I refer to myself in the third person, it's to mispronounce names repeatedly. And so you read Where Monsters Lie. What's your first impressions of this?
I had so much fun with this. This is, first of all, any kids watching, go tell your parents that maybe this book isn't for you. Maybe you should go watch Ninja Turtles or something for a minute, because definitely not a kid's book, but it's just a lot of silliness for grown-ups. It's a crazy premise. I love the premise. It's basically a housing development where only serial killers get to live there. and they've got like one of every possible architect. You've got the solve the death puzzle guy. You've got the crazy lady with her puppet. You've got someone whose name I'm not even going to say out loud. You've got the
Yeah.
killer clown, and they all live together in this housing development, and they take care of each other. And it's all about family, Rocky, isn't it? All about family.
It is, and you alluded to the names on what I like about. I like about the very first page. You flip the page and it has a wanted poster, and it introduces you to all these serial killers right off the bat, and I love it. And it's Zell, Puzzle Man, Frankie and Pearl, F Master. That's the 4-letter word. The F Master, Richard, Packrat, St. Julian, and Daniel Dawson. And as you read the comic, it becomes clear that those of us who are even remotely familiar with horror movies and the lore and the mythologies will recognize versions of these characters in this comic. And as you say, they live in this neighborhood, and they seem to be there's certain rules that they have to follow. And it's quite interesting how things start off. I mean, it starts off with a bang. Starts off with kids running away from in terror from a house, and they're knocking on an old lady's door asking for help because one of their friends has been murdered in the neighboring house.
Yep. Super much right into it. We're in medias res. We think, typically you get your main characters on the first panel, first page, usually, and then 2 seconds later, most of them are dead, and you go, oh, it's going to be that kind of a book. I see. I know what I'm in for now.
Yeah, and it's I like the misdirection like that, and because right away, well, I mean, I know it's a cliche to say because we're all sick and tired of hearing that phrase, subverting of expectations, but that's kind of what this is, and because right away, the writer here, Kyle Starks, just sort of assumes that. I guess he just sort of assumes that we're going to sympathize and try to relate to these serial killers as they deal with this problem, because one of their own, this Puzzle Man, had the audacity to kill some children in their neighborhood, and of course that's a violation of the
That's
rule.
one of the HOA rules, right? You can't have your grass too high, can't leave your trash cans out on this too long, and you can't murder people on property. You got to do that business elsewhere.
Yeah, and what's impressive, what I enjoy about this is for an opening issue is that we get the personalities of all these characters, and we see which of these serial killers, and I'll call them serial killers for short. Serial killers. Well, I guess they're monsters, hence the title Where Monsters Lie. And it's interesting. It's called Where Monsters Lie as opposed to Where Monsters Live, and because these monsters. I guess maybe it's appropriate because they do lie to each other, these characters. They are evil bastards after all. They're
layers of meaning, yes.
Yeah. And just how you get to know the personalities. In particular, sort of like the leader of this neighborhood seems to be this old lady, Zell. And she's the one that sort of runs things. And she's sort of like I don't know, I get the impression this is almost like a condominium, like a series of homes where,
She's the HOA president, for sure.
Yeah, thanks. It's funny because HOA, we don't have that term in Canada. We have
Homeowners Association.
Yeah, exactly.
Which,
I guess
some parts of America, almost all the homes are part of that. I'm not part of that one. My parents are, where they live in Florida. What it basically means is that for this neighborhood, the HOA gets to set certain rules. And some places they're very modest and mild and make perfect sense. And other places they're super anal and like your house has to be one of these 4 colors. And if you let your grass get a millimeter too long, someone's going to report you and you're going to get fined. So it's really playing with that idea with these crazy characters.
Yeah, it's similar to condominium corporations in Canada, where you got to follow certain rules, and we call them restrictive covenants. You can only build with certain colors or certain heights and certain conditions and certain materials and what have you. And then there's the common property and everything else. And it's interesting because the thing is about monsters, serial killers, these are agents of chaos, really. They have their own way of thinking, but the craziness of actually thinking that you could contain this kind of monstrous chaos living in the same neighborhood under an HOA, it's just an insane premise to begin with. And of course, it's destined to be an absolute disaster. Zell, the head of the HOA, I guess you could, as you say, is once Puzzle Man violates this rule, they have a meeting, and of course that's where we get to meet all these characters, and that's where she's got to put her foot down, and they got to reel it in because they're really concerned if one of the children escaped, and Puzzle Man is not aware that one of the children escapes, and one of these kids has escaped, and ultimately that's where the trouble starts, and it really starts to go from there.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's you can see where the concept came. You get the crazy people. You get the order versus chaos is really what they're playing with here. And again, it's right out of the bat. We don't get to spend time with them in their normal, typical lives. From panel one, they're already things have gone wrong, and they manage to they think mop up their problem. Right? They've got these teenagers. They kill off the teenagers. The other serial killers come out to help, and one kid gets away. But the puzzle master, who wasn't supposed to be doing this on property, he claims that, no, I've accounted for them all. We got this many teenagers, this many corpses. We're cool, everybody. It's fine. Don't yell at me anymore. But he runs off, and we can tell that their idyllic existence here is going to be complicated.
Yeah, and there's one particular scene where Zell is walking, and she's having a conversation with another person by the name of Richard, or pardon me, that's not his name. I forget his name, but he's sort of like, I got the impression it was like the Charles Manson of the group. And
he looks like he was so nice. He kept to himself. He was so quiet. We never thought this would happen. That kind of serial killer.
Yeah.
Not the clown who, he's definitely got bodies buried. Not the crazy redneck family inbred who are also cannibals. Yeah. It's the normal guy. And that's another trope.
Yeah, it is. And you mentioned it, and this cannibal eating family, which are ran by Grandpa Murder is his name. They walk by his house, and he's moving in 2 weeks early. And apparently this is a violation of the rules as well, because apparently there's a rule that you can't have something called shapers. You can't have two shapers living
shades,
together.
Right?
Shades.
That's
sorry?
if you've seen like Jason Voorhees, they called him the Shape early on, where it's just like the silent, imposing, doesn't run, doesn't chase, but just keeps coming. That's the Shape.
Well, that makes sense, and it makes sense that probably two of them shouldn't be living in the same neighborhood, but now two of them are going to be living in the same neighborhood for 2 weeks, just as the SHIT is hitting the fan, because this kid goes to the police. And just so happens the investigator is there must be some sort of secret investigatory unit that because there's the way this kid reported what happened sort of tipped off certain agencies, investigative agencies.
And in fact, if you read the solicit, and I recommend you don't read the solicit because it does something I hate, where the solicit gives away a plot point that hasn't even happened yet in the whole first issue.
Oh, man.
So... yeah, I hate it when it does that. But so I guess they want to sell their book. It's an indie book. You got to get people hooked. So they want to give something away. But yeah, you learn something about that police station. Presumably, we learn about it more in the second issue, but it is let slip in the solicit.
Well, I guess you can imply that here, and I share your sentiment. It's unfortunate, but people need to get attention for their comics. This is one that has my attention. It does deserve it. I think it's very good. For one issue, I mean, you're right invested in these characters, and what I really like as well is, I know this sounds odd, but I could almost, if you're someone who doesn't like horrors, I think you still might enjoy this comic, because I could.
Yeah,
it's not.
You have to be okay with some gore. I mean, folks who saw the panels that Rocky already put up, it's comic gore. It's over the top, eyeballs flying out of heads kind of comic gore. And if that makes you unhappy, if that squicks you out, you just move on to a different book. It's not for you. But if you can look at that on the second page and go, okay, that's kind of funny, you can be on board with this.
Yeah, but even I guess what really sold this for me was the character work. Is that I'm actually curious as to, what do these crazy serial killers do in their spare time? Because there's this organization, this HOA. I mean, you got to wonder, where do they go when they're, how do they always manage to survive? They were killed numerous times. Who resurrects them? Who treats them? And I guess it's all related to this unit, and apparently there is an investigatory police body authority that is looking for them. And this kid basically shocks this detective by telling him, yeah, it's not just one guy it's the neighbors came out and killed the rest of my friends. So it's total chaos, and definitely got this detective's attention, only to end, much to the chagrin of the inhabitants of the HOA, all these monsters. It looks like we're already headed for a confrontation next issue. At least that's what the final pages seem to allude to.
Yeah, I might have thought that this is going to be the whole series is leading up to this, but no, they're going right for it. There is no decompression here. There's a couple other books this week that have moderate to lesser amounts of decompression, but I guess if you want to, I got a story you want to tell, and you've got, I think this is a 5-issue mini. He's gonna go for it.
Yeah, and we should give a shout out to Peter Kowalski, colors by Vladimir Popov. I thought the art worked very well. As you said, you already alluded to that. You mentioned the scene, the gore. It was a great conveyance of just how casual the horror and the terror is, and just the art sort of popped off the page because you want that in a good horror. And I thought the facial expressions on these characters were good, and the dialogue was excellent. I thought everything really flowed very well.
I do love that panel there that shows like a map of the whole neighborhood that you just went past. I love a good map in any book. That was my favorite page in Lord of the Rings, favorite page in The Hobbit. You open up and you can see, even if the story's not going to go there, you can like imagine in your head what's going on. So I love to see this one little cul-de-sac where we know that at that house all the way at the end, the far end of the loop, that's where these kids were in Puzzle Master's house. And you can see where all the other serial killers hang out. And you see down at the end, there's a little setback and they've got some space connecting them to the rest of the world. And it really fires the imagination.
Yeah, it does. It does. And do you have a favorite yet? Do you have a favorite serial killer in this story yet, or not?
It's like asking me to choose my favorite child. It's just how do you pick?
What a wonderful analogy. You must have, and you're a teacher yet, so I suppose you can say that because you teach a lot of future monsters. I'm sure, right?
Future and possibly present. Yes.
Yeah. Right on. All right. Sorry about that. My phone rang. But in any event, we'll just it's my mom. She'll have to call back. I'll just shut that off. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. So what would you rate this? What would you rate this? And would you recommend it for readers? And what score would you give it out of 10, Jason?
Yep. Again, with the caveats before that, if you can't handle a little comic gore, just let this one slip by. It's not for you. Go read some Scrooge McDuck. You'll have a better time. But yeah, if you can sign on to seeing some gross stuff and laughing at it, this was a fantastic number one. Straight into it, right out of the gate. You know what's coming up. Lots of laughs. I give this a 9 out of 10.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I'm going to give it a solid 9 as well. I agree with you. I also will quickly show I got the alternate cover. I chose the alternate cover on this. And the alternate cover has Puzzle Man in his kitchen about to kill a victim. So anyways, yeah, it's great. Both cover A and cover B are great. But cover A does have all the characters on it. So that's probably the one that people would want to pick up. But yeah, okay, good. All right. So the next comic we're going to be reviewing is called Immortal Sergeant by Joe Kelly.
Yes, we go from the killer's side to the lawman side of things. So polar opposites in a way.
Yeah, that's right. And this is a this is a black and white. This is a black and white comic. Like it's not. It actually surprised.
It is. It's a very stylized black and white look. It's created by Joe Kelly and Ken Nimura, and I know Joe Kelly is mostly a writer. He's done some art as well, and the credits don't seem to be too specific. I'm going to think that Joe Kelly probably wrote it and art by Ken Nimura, but I can't say that for certain. Now, this is the same team who made a comic called I Kill Giants back in 2008, 2009. And that was very successful, well received. It was made into a 2017 movie. So this seems to be their follow up to that. And like this book, that book was in black and white and some shades of gray. This book has even simpler, even more stylized art. So if you're here again for super detailed, high res art, real, you want to see actual faces, you want to see the eyeballs fly out of the head. That's not what this is. This is very cartoony to an extreme. It's just a different kind of reading experience. So you should know that going in. Otherwise, you'll be disappointed. But if you can accept that it's your black and white kind of distorted version of art to kind of sell the emotion rather than to look at all realistic, that's the book we're getting today.
Yes, and I should say that just for people watching on YouTube, I'm not doing it justice because there's a lot of double page spreads here. You really get an appreciation for the art. You get a better appreciation of the art if you actually buy the comic and actually you get the full page, because there's a lot of double page spreads, and it actually feels a lot better when you actually read it as a comic, and I think you get a better appreciation of it. I will show the page I'm showing now. This sergeant. This is the story. This sergeant is retiring. This is a guy who's he's got a reputation. He's got a good reputation as a very good cop, and he's got a nickname, Immortal Sergeant. And what this first issue, what Joe Kelly does so well here, and I never read I Kill Giants, and but I got to tell you, the art here. I had laugh out loud moments in this issue. The character moments in the dialogue here were just so well done. This sergeant, he doesn't want to retire. Sergeant, he does not want to retire. His name is James Sargeant. Sargeant does not want to retire at all. He basically he's divorced. He's paying alimony. He doesn't see his family all that much. His entire life is basically tied up in his job, and he really seems to love his job. He really seems to love his job, and he hates the fact that he's retiring. And it's embodied by a scene where all his fellow coworkers get together and they buy him a watch, wishing him a happy retirement with an inscription on the inside of the pocket watch, and he throws it up and he shoots it, and he's not a happy camper right off the bat.
No, and yeah, his name is Sargeant. So again, that lets you know right off the bat what's going on here. He is an archetype, right? We've all seen the hard-boiled sergeant, the cop whose job is his life. And it takes that archetype, but then adds on all these little character details to make that kind of cardboard character you have in your head, to fill it out. And you see relationships he has with his co-workers, who he's kind of gruff with, of course, because he's a gruff sergeant, but he's actually teaching them things. And you see then he has this other side of his life where he goes to a cop bar that I think is even called Coppers. And then he goes off to another bar where there's no police around, and you see a whole new side of his personality. The other bar, it looks like basically everyone who works there and the patrons are all African American. And he's more animated there. He flirts with the waitress. You can see right away in 2 panels, he flirts with this waitress every week. They have their shtick going together. And you just wonder, wow, what would his coworkers think? Yep, there they are. What would his coworkers think if they saw this side of Sergeant James Sargeant? And he just seems like a really fun, more complicated guy than most people in his life probably know.
Yeah, and it's funny. He reminds me in one way a little bit. I put a smile on my face reading this because it reminds me of my dad. My dad passed away last year, but I remember my dad's retiring. My dad always bitched about his job. He owned a welding shop. My parents were successful. He owns a welding shop, and he always bitched about his job. But the fact of the matter is, he thrived at it. And despite what he always would convey, it was hard to escape the impression that he loved his job, because he did. And when he retired, he discovered that a lot of the friends he thought he had, they really were just acquaintances through work. And my dad went through an adjustment in retirement. And when I look at this sergeant retiring, so much of his life is tied up and related to his job. And there's nothing wrong with that, because, they call it work, but, if you love what you do, then it's not work. Why retire? I mean, and there's an argument for that. And I couldn't help but think that this is a guy that loves his job. Maybe he's divorced. Maybe he's not as close to his kids. But you know what? His workers love him. He's good at what he does. And as he said, he even got upset at there's one scene in particular I thought was quite poignant. You know, a couple of other coworkers are saying, "My God, I don't know how you worked in this shithole for this long." And I couldn't. I'm going to retire when I'm 43. I don't know how you could stay here so long. And they bumped his nameplate off his desk, and he got upset. You know, like he takes pride even at work, even the place where he worked. He seemed to really enjoy it. So
turn to look at it. He wasn't facing them. He heard the sound and he knew what had happened because that's his world, that office. And this book does really well at the cliche show don't tell. We don't get any blocks of text explaining what he did at his job. We don't get any blocks of text saying he was forced into retirement. He had to retire because of X, Y, or Z. We just see these characters interacting in this world in a very natural way. And it makes you want to learn more. We do see that he's got this retirement going on, but again, something that a tantalizing hint that is not explained at all is we see this plastic bag with a shoe in it. I'm not sure if it's a woman's shoe or a little kid's shoe. And I gather it's evidence. It looks like an evidence bag. And we see one flashback panel of a foot next to that shoe. And again, the story I'm writing in my head is that there's that one unsolved case, the one case you could never crack. And again, this is just me making stuff up from 2 panels worth of black and white images.
I think you're right.
He solved that case, and it's haunting him, and he can't feel confident in retiring until he solves that case. And I'm guessing that's what some of these next couple issues are going to be about. And no one stopped and told me that. We just see a shoe in a bag, and we see a flashback panel with those nice little curved corners, so you know it's a flashback with the foot and a shoe.
Yeah.
We don't know who this is. We don't know if it's someone he knows. We don't know if it's related to anyone else at the job. We don't know what his coworkers think of this. But we know it's important because he sees it, and he makes that expression, that fantastic last panel on that page.
Yeah. And he's someone that he doesn't like to leave things unfinished. And he even made the comment to his coworkers earlier than that before he opened up his drawer and looked at that shoe in that evidence bag that, he almost like gave him a little bit of a speech saying, the world is basically the world's a terrible place. And we can actually have an opportunity, despite the fact that we have terrible jobs and we're always targets. We have an opportunity to make the world a better place. This guy is actually a really good guy. So it's one of those things. It's sort of like the plumber always has the worst plumbing in his own house. Maybe his personal life is in shambles, but he's really good at his job, and that's his way. And he doesn't want to give that up. And you really see just how everything. He even has a little bit of a little James Bond feel to it because that black waitress, I call that waitress his money penny, the way she teases him. And
I thought you were going to talk about his car because he has a James Bond kind of car too. He has this, he even says what it is, a 72 Cadillac Coupe de Ville.
Yeah.
He calls it the last great American car.
That's
and
right.
if I'm reading his word bubbles, I got to use this voice because that's what he sounds like. He's got to be gruff and gravelly, and he sees these street toughs, as Jim always likes to say, just leaning on his car. He pulls out his key fob, pushes a button, and gives them, a little less in electricity. Not enough to kill them, probably, but enough so they probably won't do that again.
Oh yeah, and it's hilarious because the one kid, the kid says, "What the hell was that? I can't feel my hands," and the other guy said, "Hands, my freaking nuts." So just, like I say, there's humor like that there. There's also humor when he's having sort of like a little bit of sexual teasing of the largesse black waitress, and she says, "Yeah, we'll get together. I'll bring the bedpan," and I mean, just making cracking little jokes at him, and there's teasing and there's innuendo, and and he's got an attitude because he's kind of like an older. He's obviously older. He's in retirement, and he's youth is truly wasted on dipshits, is what he says after dealing with the kids. And
so true, Rocky. So true.
Yeah, but so it's hard, and maybe because I know I'm probably demographically I'm an older reader. And I can appreciate this, and you know, I just got to say one thing too, that I'm someone I don't read a lot of manga, and if you'd tell me that, I'm always constantly amazed how just a black and white art can impress me. Shout out to artist Ken Namura here. This impresses me because more story, as you said, and you said it, you nailed it. So much story is told with so less. You don't need all the detailed art, yet somehow he conveys just the right amount of art, and we don't need the dialogue. It's all in the pictures. So much of it's in the pictures and in the expressions of the kids, and of course the dialogue that is there is just enough dialogue to make you laugh or grin or think
Yeah, you
and
can tell that
reflect.
this is a team who's worked together before, who know each other, who trust each other,
Yeah,
and they're really, if it reads to me like a writer artist who just did it all himself. There's a certain kind of magic that can happen if you've got a person who can write and draw, and you know that it's just so perfectly integrated that it's like it's coming out of one mind.
yeah,
This has the feel like it's coming out of one mind, and just the partnership here is evident.
yeah, yeah. And man, I was just I again, as an opening issue, I've said this before. I sound like a broken record every time. I did the same thing when I think the last time you and I reviewed some indie and with Jim. First issues are so important, and when you nail the first issue, readers will find a way. They'll find that comic and they'll come back. And this is another issue, just like where Monsters Lies. This is an issue where I am definitely coming back because I like this guy. I like this guy. I don't want him to retire either. And why do his friends want him to retire? And it's almost like he's not appreciated. Yeah, he's cool. He's kind of James Bond. He's got a cool car. He's got good relationships. There's even a seat with his name on it at the local bar that has a plaque where he seats at the local bar. It's just this is a fun character. And again, when
He
I can
is.
read it,
He's a character I'm going to remember for a long, long time because he is the archetype, but he's also very, very specific. And I want to learn more about him. This is a 9-issue series, which is an unusual length for a series, but I guess when you're an indie, you can do whatever the heck you want, right? You don't
yeah.
need to write for a 5-issue or 6-issue trade. So Joe Kelly and Ken Nomura said, you know what? This is a 9-issue story, and that's how many issues we're going to give it. And I expect I'm going to read all 9 of them.
Well, out of 10, what would you rate this?
This Sargeant is such a great guy. Again, not a great guy. Like, I don't know if I'd want to live next to him, but I certainly want to read about him in a book. And just for that, I got to give this even a 9.3, just because it's one of the great characters I've read in a long time.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with 9. I'm I want to see where this goes. I'm hoping. I don't know. Did you in the solicits? Is this just a series, or is this a series, or is this a limited series? That do you know?
I think it was at the Image website was where I saw that it's a 9-issue limited series.
Yeah. Well, so
Now,
we have.
there's also a note that these characters were created for a short story in something called The Rattling Wall, which is a literary magazine that seems to have gone out of business around 2015. So I wasn't able to track down whatever that short story was. That I wanted to see more of the Sergeant right away. So I figured, okay, I'll go if I can read that, but doesn't seem to exist on the web. But that's where he comes from, and we've got 8 more issues in this series to figure out where he's going.
Well, again, another good one, and hopefully we got 3 more comics to review here. So we'll make our way to the next one, and the next one
Yeah, I
is.
mean, we may seem like we're cheap dates here, right? We give out all 9s, but that's after Rocky and I whittle down the huge list of, mediocre to maybe even less than mediocre books. We're bringing you what we think are mostly the cream of the crop. So if we're giving out high scores, that's because we already did the hard work.
Yeah, yeah. We don't hand out high scores like Halloween candy. We do, we do actually. These are generally pretty good comics. Although maybe the scores will start to go down here. We shall see. But White
Well, we'll
Savior
see.
is next, and this is one where this one I had sort of mixed feelings about.
Okay.
What about yours? Well, it's basically the premise here was
Don't let the title scare you away. I saw the title and I went, oh, it's going to be It's going to be one of those books. It's going to be a Mark Russell. It's going to be something that makes me feel bad for having read it. But no, it doesn't go that direction, which made me
Well,
happy.
this one, ironically enough, White Savior had one scene that made me laugh out loud because this one also has humor. It's silly humor, but for some reason, I don't know, I'm a silly guy, I found the humor fun. But this basically is a story. This deals with a legend of this, an old legend in Japanese lore where a white man shows up to be a savior, and this is essentially the story of a modern day Japanese grandfather talking to his grandson, telling him about this legend of this white savior who ends up not being a savior at all, just being a drunkard. And there's the oral tradition where it's not in the history books, but there's this white savior story that this white savior was anything but a savior. He showed up to there was a myth that a white savior would show up to save this Japanese village, but he ended up doing nothing of the kind, and the village was completely wiped out. But there's no record of this in history, and so this kid thinks his grandfather, who is basically telling him this story, this kid thinks his grandfather is just crazy. He's just telling him because he keeps telling him the same story all the time that he could pretty much recite it back. And this kid ends up, ironically enough, in the very same time period, meeting this white savior by the end of the issue. But how he gets there is through an extraordinary series of events that involves, I think, a little bit of misdirection, humor, craziness, decent
Yeah,
dialogue.
things happen that we're not supposed to take things entirely seriously. Fourth wall breaking jokes are made. I think maybe if I'm going to criticize it, maybe too many jokes are made. They really pack in the jokes. It's very kind of Deadpool-ish in just that density. And I'm going to say about 80, 85% of the jokes hit, which still means that you're still reading a lot of clunkers. But so this, I mean, let's give the credits here. This is written by Eric Nguyen and Scott Berman. Now, Eric Nguyen is a penciler and inker on a lot of Marvel stuff, so he's done a lot of art. And Scott Berman is a writer who's new to comics. Colors by Iwan Joko Triono. And so you can tell this comes out of their love and kind of also laughing at some of those white savior kind of movies. If you think like The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise, where, okay, a whole Japanese village needs Tom Cruise to save their ass. That's kind of silly. And they say, yeah, it's a silly, stupid movie, but we also kind of love it. So it has that balance of making fun of the trope, but also knowing that it's a fun trope for a reason and laughing at it and with it at the same time. So, and the characters, that this character, his name is Todd Parker. So you can tell they intentionally give this guy, he's a film teacher. He's a very Americanized Asian American person. And I don't know if he lives with or at least hangs out with his grandfather, who, I mean, you can see him there on the page. His grandfather looks like what a white guy thinks is a stereotypical Asian guy, right? He's wearing the orange robe like he's a Buddhist priest. You don't know if he's going to start teaching you kung fu. You don't know if he's going to snatch the pebble out of your hand.
Yeah.
Again, this is me seeing the tropes in a very obviously intentionally tropey character. You can tell that he's told this story of the white savior of the village over and over again to his grandson, whereas his grandson doesn't even hear it anymore. It's just part of the background noise of the house. And then you see the kid go about his day. You can see that he's a nice guy, but he's also kind of a dummy. He's a sad sack. He tries to stop this girl from getting mugged. Turns out it's all a scam. She was in on it, and they steal his wallet. And as he goes chasing after these scammers, these muggers, I don't even know what happens. We get some weird panels, and now he's in ancient Japan. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah. And so suddenly he's in that story that his grandfather always told him. And it's a cliche story where he accidentally saves the life of one of the warring samurai. And now that samurai's in his debt, and he's part of this world. And at that very last end of the story, that's when he recognizes some of these names. Oh, I've heard that name before. I've heard this. This sounds familiar. Wait, what village are we in? And he realizes, oh no, I'm in my grandfather's story. As you see that white savior at the end, who also has a very silly name, Nathan. Yes, Nathan, the white savior, who is this complete bozo, drunken guy. They all think he's the greatest because they've had this prophecy. And I'm guessing with a name like Nathan that he probably got into this world the same way that our hero Todd did, but we don't know. It's just, oh no, they all think he's going to save their ass, but he knows they're toast if they trust him. So what are we going to do? Are we going to try to save this village? Are we just going to try to get back home? I don't know.
Well, you mentioned something that sort of that makes this comic book a little bit eclectic, a little bit odd, because there is kind of breaking a fourth wall, but there kind of isn't. But yet there's humor here that's really that doesn't quite fit necessarily what's going on. And the dialogue is just out of whack. I mean, for example, when he suddenly appears in samurai era Japan, I mean, he actually screams as he lands. He says, "My balls! I landed on my balls!" And meanwhile,
this is our second consecutive comic with an "Ow, my balls hurt" joke. So
exactly.
You tune into the Comic Boom Rocky channel for the high quality content.
And the two samurai masters, they're battling each other, and the one says to the other one, "What was that?" And the other guy says, "I think someone landed on their balls." I mean, it's so dumb. It's dumb, but I can't help. But I find it hilarious because in between this is a very serious fight. This is a massacre that's taken place on a village. And here are these two good guy and bad guy with the dialogue, and I will end you, I will end your reign. They're all so serious. And then all of a sudden you get dialogue like that. And I just found it to be very, very entertaining. And I was always kind of on edge just when I was thinking I was getting a handle on it. Well, the humor would actually, just when I thought maybe it was getting tropey, the humor would actually make me laugh, and I found myself enjoying it more. And so it's one of those things where this is another one where I'm probably going to pick up the second issue because it's kind of funny. And this goofy kid, and by the way, this goofy kid is kind of useless. He doesn't like working out. He doesn't seem to have, he has the instinct to help people, but he doesn't have the skill. He doesn't have any fighting skill. He doesn't have any of that. And so how is this kid going to, in any way, shape, or form, actually, help save? I mean, he's going to be as useless as Nathan. This alcoholic Nathan character, we know this white savior is not actually going to end up doing anything useful because history says he failed, at least in the oral history tradition that the grandfather told his grandson about. So how is this kid going to help? Isn't he's just more of a sober version of Nathan. So I'm really curious how these two sort of oddballs are going to help save this Japanese village. So I'll wait and see, I guess.
It has the tone of the words is intentionally kind of bumping up against, in a strange way, the seriousness of the story, right? It feels to me almost like a 1980s comedy movie where you've got the sardonic, your Chevy Chase kind of character who is just kind of cracking jokes and kind of above it all, but also there's something big going on in the background. So it has that fun kind of connection to it.
Yeah. So I'll go first in terms of rating this one. I thought this was this made me laugh actually the hardest with that one particular scene. But I would give this, because I got more questions than answers. I'm going to give this an 8.5 out of 10. But I enjoyed it.
I think I'm in the same kind of area. The art is perfectly serviceable to tell the story. I like the scenes in the ancient Japan a lot more. The scenes of the modern day are just kind of, serviceable. You can tell that the artist probably had more fun drawing all these old weapons and outfits and architecture. So that part was great. And presumably our next issue, I would guess, is entirely set in ancient Japan. At least that's where the story seems to be going. So yeah, and again, some of the jokes were just, if you could let me go through and just take out like 10, 15% of the jokes and tighten it up a little bit, maybe the 10, 15% I take out wouldn't be the same ones you take out. Obviously, we leave the balls joke in because that's the big number. But yeah, I go with 8.3 out of 10 for this. It's a fun book. It's not nearly as memorable as Sargeant, but these are characters I'm going to enjoy reading about at least one more time.
Right on. Okay. Well, that takes us to our next comic book Nightclub by Mark Millar and
Nightclub.
Juanin Ramirez. Did I say that name? Did I say that right? Juanan,
I, I'd probably go Wanan, but I'm no
Juanan
expert in that
Ramirez.
either. Maybe
But
Wanan.
yeah, so well, I think you enjoyed the first issue slightly because we reviewed the first issue of this. This is the
Correct.
second one. So how did you generally find the second one?
Well, it wasn't as much fun as the first, but again, I have a strong bias towards number one issues because I love that open the page. I don't know what's going to happen. Show me a new world, show me a new character, tell me a new story. And that's what Nightclub number one did. Where Nightclub number two has some great stuff in it, but like any number two issue, it's going to be a little bit more of the same. So we have our dumbass teenager Danny who got turned into a vampire because he wanted to be a YouTube star. He did a trick on a roof, fell, broke his damn neck, and because he was basically dying anyway, this cop who's also a vampire putting together a vampire squad to do something. Figured, well, he's better off if I just turn him into a vampire and put him on my team. That was issue number one. And again, it was super high energy, super fast paced. A lot of other writers might have taken that first issue and made it 3, 4 issues, not Mark Miller. And in this issue, we keep the pedal down again. He wants to show off to his buddies, who there's a girl and a guy, Sam and Amy, and he doesn't just want to show off for them. He wants them to join him. He wants them to be part of the team. So, of course, like a dumb kid, he just shows up in broad daylight, covered up with a Lucador mask, because, sunlight vampires, not such a good thing. He says, "Hi, guys," poof. And naturally, they freak the hell out and start running. Because what would you do if a guy smoking all over with a Lucador mask appears to you? You get the hell out of there. He should have just texted first. So we get the whole kind of fun chase scene at the beginning of them running through the city. And eventually he does catch up to them and say, "Here's what happened." We skip the whole scene where he explains what happened. We don't need to see that. We read the first issue. So I like that. That's a smart choice.
Yeah.
And very quickly, the girl, whose name again is Amy, she wants to be a vampire. She's in for it right away. Now, these kids, they have had nothing. They're not in the hospital dying. They have a whole lot more to lose than Danny here. And Danny certainly doesn't have permission from Detective Vampire to, add some more people to the team. But these are dumb kids doing dumb kid things. So they want to be vampires. He makes them both into vampires. Boom, we cut to 3 more days later, and then we see them interacting with this world. So it's super fast paced, lots of adventure. It's a superhero origin story, plus some more realistic stupidity from the teenagers.
Yeah, I love the action here, and I love how it. I like how the simple concept of and it's actually on the advertisement. It's one of the you spoke earlier about how one of the solicitations sort of perhaps reveal too much information in regard to where monsters lie. A previous comic we reviewed, but this one here, there's an ad that I actually put up behind me. You're 17 years old. You've been bitten by a vampire. What would you do? And that's the premise. So and it's a really good one. What would you do? Now this kid decides to get his friends in on the action, and his friends basically they very much want a piece of the action. However, as you said, they don't really think it through. And one of the things that happened in the first issue is that this detective, one can infer, and I might be wrong, but I inferred that this detective probably doesn't go around just flippantly, choosing, who to bite and who to turn into a vampire. He probably made a very careful choice. And unfortunately, in this case, the lead character here, I forget his name. Danny, thank you. He just assumes he's not making. He just assumes that his friends are good people. He and at the end here, one of his other buddies, they confronts his schoolhood bully, and it might be.
And who wouldn't want to confront your school? Everyone had some school bully somewhere back there. Who would not want to have super vampire powers and
Yeah.
take him out on your bully. There's some wish fulfillment for you right there.
And you got to wonder though, because now we're getting the scenes that you want to see as a reader. Yeah, get the bully, get the bully. Those are good, satisfying scenes. But it's that oldest story. The guy does the person who's bullied become the bully at the end of this story? Because now because once you're a vampire, that isn't a power you can just give back. You're immortal. You're that way for life, and. So we're not only getting set up, we're not only being told what some of the rules are for being vampires here, and they explore some of their powers here, but I think that there's going to be consequences down the road, and Mark Miller is excellent at that. He's right now we're seeing the advantages of being a vampire. It's all happy-go-lucky. Oh yeah, 17-year-old kids, they're powerful. They can jump and they feel nothing. Even if they fall, injure themselves, they seem to instantly heal. What could be better than that? I suspect that the shoe is going to drop on this story in the next issue and subsequent issues, and I'm waiting for that shoe to drop, or in this case, the basketball. And it's going to be. I'm really kind of curious to where that's going to go, because it's never all roses in a Mark Miller story. So I'm really curious to see where this goes.
Yeah, sure. So we're grown-ups reading this, and the characters are not asking some really important questions, like, how do they get to go to school if sunlight burns them?
Yeah.
How do you explain to your parents that you just can't do that anymore? There's a crucifix on the family wall. I can't go in the family room anymore. How is that going to work out? They don't think about it. They're 17. That's fine. And a lot of vampire stories, whether it's Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel or The Lost Boys, you see the great power, but you also see those downsides. And no one in this book sees the downsides yet. But again, that's the dissonance as we as readers are asking this question, because at least you and I are not dumb teenagers. We're dumb middle-aged men, and we're waiting to see when that shoe is going to drop, and it's got to be coming. This is a 6-issue miniseries, and we're only 2 issues in, so plenty of room. And I want to see the scene I'm waiting for is when Detective Nick finds out that Danny made 2 more vampires.
Yeah.
We don't see what happened with Detective Nick between last issue and this one. Why he's not still with Danny, what he told Danny, okay, here's what you need to do, here's how I'm going to contact you. These are scenes we have to write in our own heads to try to fill in, because Danny is off the leash. He is completely untethered. He's doing what he wants to do, and Detective Nick's going to find out, and Detective Nick is not going to be pleased.
Yeah, and it's funny, we having just reviewed Where Monsters Lie, even monsters and serial killers who live in the same neighborhood, they have rules that they have to follow. I'm quite certain that vampires have rules they have to follow, and you got to wonder, where the hell was this detective? It was kind of irresponsible of the detective. It makes me wonder, what did the detective expect? This detective vampire that turned Danny into a vampire.
Has he done this before? He said he's putting a team together. We don't know if Danny's his first recruit. We don't know if he's got a crack team of 75 mostly older people who are more responsible. We don't know about that, and I'm really curious to find out about that team.
Yeah, no, it's and really, there's beyond that. There's not a heck of a lot that happens in this issue, other than these kids they're having a good time exploring their powers. We learn a little bit about their powers. We know that they can't cross the river. There's an invisible barrier that they can't apparently cross water.
Running water, yeah, that's a vampire thing. Can't cross running water, which we don't know the geography here. Maybe they're on like a Manhattan kind of island. Are they just stuck there? Can they never leave? They don't think through the consequences. What happens if we see that they're riding on top of a car, the car is about to go over a bridge, and it's like they hit a glass wall and slide down it. What would happen if they're on an airplane going 500 miles an hour? Are they just, red mist? That's
exactly right. So you got to wonder, you can imagine that there's can be some pretty graphic and gory scenes moving forward. And there's no guarantee that any of all these 3 characters will survive. They might even, one of them could even possibly end up being a bad guy, because as they get older and realize they're not getting older. Well, what's their moral compass? I mean, you think your friends. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe the detective had good instincts in choosing Danny, but did Danny have good instincts just biting his would-be girlfriend?
I'd argue that the detective did not have good instincts in choosing Danny, because look at what Danny went and did.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So again, this is a Mark Miller Netflix related comic. So it's possible it'll become a TV show at some point. It's part of his Netflix deal. And as part of that Netflix deal, he's selling these comics for $2, $1.99. So
Great
I
deal.
know I sure got, I'm not going to use that in my rating, but did I get $1.99 worth of fun out of this? I absolutely did. And I certainly can't say that out of every $4.99, $5.99 book I've bought this week. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun, and just the idea of teenage vampires and luchador masks. I'm
Yeah.
sold. That's all I need to hear, and I'm in.
So what would you give it?
This is, it didn't have that novelty that we got last time because it's continuous story. But I like these teenagers. I'm glad we have some shenanigans going on. I'm writing scenes in my head what I want to see next, which is always a great sign. So yeah, I'm going to give this another 9 out of 10. Thank you, Mark Miller, and give me some more.
Oh, I'm not going to go that high. I'm going to give it. I'm going to give this more of. I thought this was good. I thought it was entertaining, but I'm going to give it an 8. But that's still pretty good.
Okay.
It's still pretty
It's a
good.
little light. It's
Yeah,
a little breezy. It's a very quick read.
yeah,
If you go through those action scenes and don't, analyze every detail, you could be through this book in 5, 6 minutes, no problem. So I can see where you're coming from. I do
yeah.
want to say that if people are interested in like a teenage vampire story that's maybe a little more into the consequences and downside, there's a manga and last season or season or two ago, an anime called Call of the Night that is really great. The anime itself looks beautiful. It's a fantastic look. So Call of the Night if you want to see some more teenage vampires taking things a little more seriously.
I don't know. Well, good. I'll have to check that out myself. That sounds good. Okay, so our final comic book we're going to be reviewing is Art Brut issue 2, which I just want to say I'm not just a comic collector and reader, but I also do. I'm guilty of the occasional spec buy, and I will do a cover buy. Almost every single variant cover of Art Brut is a fantastic looking comic book. Just absolutely beautiful art, and wow, and it's so appropriate, and that the amount of effort that the artists are putting on this series, and rightly so, because this is a series where art comes to life, where the lead character, Arthur Brut, is this character guy who can sort of go into paintings, and he solves like mysteries, and the art's coming to life, and somebody is causing art to become chaotic, and people are getting
It's an
killed.
idea that is perfect for the comic medium, right? You would not want to read a just a plain old prose textbook about this so much. It wouldn't work. Even a TV show or a movie, could look pretty, but one of the great things here is you get to a panel that has some fantastic art on it. Like even go like page, if you can get to page 5 there, which is just a little bit in there, one right there, right? That's a page that as a comic reader, I'm going to linger on that page. I'm going to take all the time I want because I can do that in a comic book just to appreciate that amazing color, that amazing graphic design, just that look of that V going down from all these colors down into nothing with that one woman at that point of the V, freezing that moment in time in a way that only happens in a comic book. And it's just, you get that moment where it's the right story told the right way by the right creators. And it just has that perfect feeling to it.
Yeah, and the creators are writer is Maxwell Prince, and the artist is last name is Marazzo. And
Martin Marazzo. Yep. So these are the creators of Ice Cream Man. So this is, again, like we said last time, this is a book they created some years back. And I guess now that Ice Cream Man has gotten some fame, some notoriety, they're putting it back out there.
Yeah, and I'm glad they did, because I said when I read the first issue, this is what a great story. Like I'm invested in this story. I want to know. I want to know what the hell's going on here. The character that we're introduced to, that we met last issue. We know Arthur Breslin, or pardon me, this Arthur.
It's Arthur Brut and
Brut.
Margot Breslin.
Margot Breslin. Yeah, there are. Well, I thought her name was Kate Breslin. Is it Margot?
I wrote down Margot, but what do I know? I may have been having a beer when I make my notes.
She's the lead detective for the Bureau of Artistic Integrity, And what's happening is that across, at various parts across America, crazy things are happening. Crazy things are happening, and in this particular issue, we get a substitute teacher who looks like Andy Warhol. He enters an art class, and he talks about he references another artist and gives a quote about.
Mhm. It's
Uh,
a Matisse drawing class. So Matisse is the guy who made the famous water lilies painting. He also did a series of paper cutouts that you may have seen. I had one on my wall when I was a kid of Icarus. And he uses this quote from Matisse that says, painters must begin by cutting out their tongues, which Matisse, I'm pretty sure, was being metaphorical. I think the idea was that you express yourself through your art, not by then explaining your art afterwards. You leave it all on the canvas, as it were.
yeah,
But this Andy Warhol guy, who was our villain from last time, who showed up to try to do bad things with the Mona Lisa, he showed up, he says this quote, and for some reason, all the students there take him completely literally, cut out their own tongues, and bleed to death, all except for one lady. And we don't know why she was immune to his suggestion. I don't know if she just doesn't have an artistic soul, an artistic spirit. For some reason, she goes to this art class, but it didn't take with her.
yeah,
And
and
yes, all these crazy art related things are happening around the world. The Mona Lisa closed one eye, and everywhere bad art stuff happens, you see this picture in the background here, which is a
winking.
winking man
Yeah,
picture. He has a certain, oval with a pointy chin and one closed eye, and we don't know who they are or what's going on.
yeah, and last issue ended with Arthur Brut and this Margot, whatever, entering the Mona Lisa picture to basically escape because they were being chased, and they end up confronting within the picture of the Mona Lisa, confronting an art tumor, which is basically they describe it. It's like cancer, but it's more creative. And this Arthur Brut, he tries to talk to it, and he ends up getting swallowed by it, and I don't even understand it. He gets swallowed by it, and he manages to destroy
Yeah,
it. And
the whole book plays with time, right? Because we left as they just went into the painting, and as we open this book, it's after they're back out of the painting. And we jump back and forth a little bit in what she's director Breslin. I don't know what her first name is, but she's a director, so let's call her by her title.
yeah,
And it goes back and forth of her remembering being in the painting. And we're not, at least I'm not entirely sure if her memories are completely reliable because she's talking about her seeing the world differently. We know that Arthur Brut, from going into paintings all these times, his brain's kind of warped and twisted. So it's starting to happen to Breslin as well. So we don't really know how they got back out of the painting. We saw they had these adventures. They confronted this art tumor, who then, when they get out of the painting, Breslin's wife or girlfriend is an artist herself, and she has a painting that looks just like the art tumor, which is never directly referenced, never explained. But again, it's there in the visuals because it's a comic, and you can see that, yeah, right there in that bottom corner. It looks just like what they end up fighting in the Mona Lisa world. And what
yeah.
the heck is that all about?
And what I love about this story is, it's not difficult to catch on to. And you mentioned the time jumps. The time jumps aren't. I didn't find them bothersome either because I was taken. I was just pulled into. I was pulled into the settings. The settings are just so vibrant and interesting because I'm not by any means, as you could obviously guess, if anyone knows anything about art, you immediately know that I don't know a lot about famous paintings or what have you. So I Googled some of these, but it's interesting, and I enjoy the journey of learning about these paintings as you go. So it's a comic book that not only has a story to tell, but also I'm learning a little bit as I go along, and I like the fact that there's one scene here in particular where Arthur Brut's mannequin buddy there talks about how art can be dangerous. And I thought, that resonated with me a bit because but art is also something that pulls us into comic books. Art can be beautiful. Art can heal. art can be so powerful, and yet it can be dangerous. We know
It's
that what
dangerous because it can go anywhere. There's no safety net. There's no limitations. When you're looking at a blank page, you can draw whatever you want on that, and that is kind of scary when you think about it.
yeah, it is. And there's a scene here in well, actually, uh, well, it's actually related. There's actually there's a backup scene where the backup story has Arthur Brut. It shows an earlier adventure of him where he goes into a painting by
It's a Picasso.
Picasso
That's
tilting it.
Picasso's painting of Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. And this is my parents had a print of this in my house when I was a little kid. So I've seen this picture
Yeah,
a lot of times. There's also really popular like college dorms there for a while, where it's Sancho and Don Quixote, and you can see the windmills there in the background.
yeah.
Very simple in a way, but very the word iconic is overused, but it certainly applies to this particular painting. It's just one of those simple images that lives forever.
And well, what I found very interesting about the story is that as they go into this Picasso painting with the Don Quixote in the painting is fearful of the windmills. He thinks that these windmills are out to get him, and you know, it's interesting that Arthur Brut has the revelation that he had basically a story specific revelation that you can use your imagination to imagine whatever you like within the painting, and so in other words, don't think of the windmills as something bad. Think of them as something good,
Mhm.
which is
And also
again,
just as a matter of perspective, as an art term, if you look at the original Picasso painting, the perspective is intentionally flattened, right? It's not a realistic drawing. He pushes everything together, so it looks like the windmills are right there next to them, but it also looks like they're completely miles in the background, or maybe they're small, or maybe they're big, and that's just the feeling was getting across. So if they're in that kind of painting, then Art Brut can make those exist in whatever perspective he wants to see them in,
yeah.
and just by that shift in thinking, he pushes them all to the background,
And
and
doesn't
that's where
that
they go.
you said it, that it's that shift in thinking. Therein lies the theme, one of the many themes of this. There's a life lesson there. If you
Mhm.
change the way you look
And
at things, the
it doesn't
things
hit you over the
change.
head. It doesn't insist on itself. It
Yeah,
just it just says
yeah.
it, and there it is.
You can take from it what you want. You can take whatever lessons from this story you want. And it's because we all look at art differently. Art really is subjective. And whether or not it can terrify us, or it can terrify one person and yet enlighten another one. And again, to weave all these concepts into a story with actually having a detective, actually having a Bureau of Artistic Integrity investigating murders, and actually having this, break the fourth wall or break through the painting. It's very well done. And, at the end of I was pulled in the first issue. The end of this second issue, I'm just pulled in. I love the art on the cover itself. And again, I appreciate your greater knowledge on the art and what have you. But I welcome. I consider myself a student of history. I like history, but I don't know a lot about art history, to be honest. It was never one of the things. I was more into military history and world history in general, and Renaissance and all that stuff wasn't my cup of tea in painting. But I find myself, really fascinated by this. And there's nothing better than like I'm Googling this. I don't need to know anything. I don't need to Google stuff about these paintings because there's enough information in this story. This story has all the information I need to enjoy that as a story. But I get rewarded when I can also Google it and say, oh, that's what that is, or that's what that painting is. And so I like when I can do that, that you get more bang for your buck when you're getting more than just a story. You can actually enjoy something by going outside of it as well.
Yeah, it's one of those worlds that feels like it exists more than in just what you see. Some books you read and you can tell that this world was created only to tell one story, and without that one story, there's like nothing behind the props, nothing behind the set. Where this feels like an existing world where lots of things are happening, and they just happen to be showing us one small part of it. And that's it's again, I made reference to Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit earlier. That's a perfect kind of story where it's a big, complicated world, and we're seeing certain things that happen in it. But you know that when we turn the page, these characters feel like they're still existing, still doing other things. And we didn't even talk about this young boy Dylan, who we were introduced to last time, and we see again this time. It's he has some sort of, we don't quite know yet, some kind of art related powers or abilities, and he's ended up in this art related sanatorium, asylum, mental health retreat. We don't know what's going on. It hasn't intersected yet with our direct art brute story, but we know they're going to come together at some point. And that's what I'm, even more than anything else, I want to see what's up with Dylan here.
Yeah, he does seem to have some power. It's interesting that we talked about how art is subjective, and we can look. You and I could look at the same picture and perhaps see something different. And this kid, he's looking at a picture of a horse, but he sees a door. He looks at a picture of a clock, and he sees the wind. And he looks at a picture of a pitcher of water, and he sees a birdie. And he looks at a picture of a building and then sees an explosion. So very clearly, he's got a very, very different perspective, a different way of looking at things. And on the surface, you could say, well, this kid's crazy. But given by the time we get to this scene in the story, we know that this kid probably is more insightful than everyone else around him because of what else has been going on with the craziness, with the paintings coming to life and what have you. So it's very well done. And again, kudos to the writers for having the foresight to republish this story, because I'm reading this for the first time.
Dylan's creepy doctor is very unsettling. We don't know how he's connected, but he clearly knows a lot that he's not letting on. He knows things he's not telling Dylan's parents. He knows things he's not telling Dylan. We don't know what he's up to. We don't know what his goals are. We don't know if he's going to be connected to the big bad of the story, but he's the kind of guy that makes you uncomfortable just to be in the same, not even actual real room with, just to be kind of meeting his eyes across the page. Something feels wrong.
Yeah.
In an interesting way.
Yeah, because he does seem to be encouraging Dylan. Dylan's given these answers that to the reader seem absurd, but the doctor seems to encourage him, saying, perfect, perfect. So the doctor seems to be really encouraging what I would view as ridiculous answers. So something else is going on, as he said, behind the scene there. And again, just so wonderfully, conveyed through the dialogue and the, artistically, the colors, everything just really works here. And I want to give a shout out to the cover art. I want to say one more thing about the cover. One of my pet peeves, and I bitch, whine, and complain about this often. I get very, very upset with comic books having 5 or 6 covers, and it's one thing to have 5 or 6 covers. It's even worse when none of them have anything to do with the content of the story. It drives me crazy. There's nothing worse than 5 Batman variant covers, and they're all just Batman posing on some building. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
Or like there's been like tie-ins to other movies. Yeah. Where there's the cover is related to this other series of covers that has nothing to do with what's in between. And people are only buying them just because they're buying the cover. They probably aren't even going to read what's inside. And
yeah,
if you're a comic company, you can make money and do that. I guess that's okay, but it doesn't seem like a good long-term business to be in.
Yeah. And obviously my point is, what I love about Art Brut is we get this is really, really great cover art, and it's directly related to the themes and the story itself, and just so well done and done in the artist, the cover artist is actually going out of his or her way. Forgive me, I guess Brazzo going out of his way. I'm not even sure these might be guest artists on the cover, but they're copying other artistic styles of masters. And damn, to a layperson like me, I'm impressed, and I'm frankly buying all these covers that I can get, and I have to go on previews to do it. But to me, it
says that Marazzo did covers A and C, and Alex Ekman Lawn did cover B. I don't know if that's a B or a C, so I couldn't tell you.
But anyways, impressive. I just wanted to give a shout out for that, because this is a total package, and a lot of comic books out there that I might love the art on. The cover art sometimes just leaves me wanting. But I love the uniformity between the cover and the interior. This really is about art. This story is about art. The cover is about art. This is all about art, and it's.
I'm going to go even further. Like we talked about that the book with some teenage vampires, and that's a fun romp, right? But it's I'm not going to say forgettable, but it's a fun story, and that's maybe all it is, but that's all it has to be. Whereas this book is about art, and I think this book, as much as if a comic book can be art, this book is art. It is what it's trying to talk about. Again, it's that unity of form and message and story and character that makes this kind of book rise above your just let's have a good time and some laughs following some characters doing some crazy stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah, if we're putting numbers on this, this is this is going to be highfalutin to say an all-time classic book, but this is the kind of book that shows what the medium of comics can do in the hands of actual artists. And so
absolutely.
I'm going to give this like a 9.8 out of 10.
Wow, that's high praise. I'm gonna, yeah, I really enjoy this too. I Because I get so much enjoyment. I actually spent more time after I was done reading the comic, googling some of this stuff, just reading about the backgrounds on paintings that really had nothing to do with the story, but it actually got me into other things. But I could agree with you, but I'll go a 9.5 only because I want to leave myself some room to give future issues higher scores.
It's hard. It's putting numbers on comic books. It's inherently a silly thing to do. So no one's going to take this, I hope, and say, oh, he gave this one a tenth of a point more than that. What I'm really saying, if I give this a high number, I'm saying this is a piece of art that people should experience. Check it out. This is a book that's going to live on many years past whatever silly thing Batman happens to be doing this week. This is literature. This is art. This is a piece of work that's going to live on.
Indeed. And well, one of the things I do when I review with another buddy of mine, Jace, we review DC Comics. Out of all the comics, out of the 5 indie comics we reviewed, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, and I'm going to put myself on the spot. If what would be your pick of these 5? If you had to rank your favorite.
Art Brut is the best of the books, for
Yeah.
sure. It has the highest aspirations, right? Some other books are having a good time, some laughs, tells a good story, and they do what they set out to do. But Art Brut sets out to do more, and I think it achieves that goal. So I gotta give it to Art Brut.
Yeah, I got to, I always love when at some point, sometimes it's fun to get into arguments with the person you're reviewing with because it can be fun sometimes. But unfortunately, I can't argue with you because I loved Art Brut as well. And I would give, I'll say a runner up though for me, and maybe your runner up's the same, but my runner up is Immortal Sergeant because it made me, it's personal reasons as well. It made me think of my dad as well. But I really enjoyed Immortal Sergeant, much to my surprise, because I'm not usually somebody who's into black and white and manga in general. But that's
When
going
I
to change.
opened that book, I was at first kind of turned off by the art. Like, oh, it seems kind of simple, seems kind of childish, but that character, I would call that the second most ambitious of the stories. The other 3 are having a good time, and I recommend people check them out. But the ones that do a little more have that ambition to live in your memory a bit more than just, oh, that was a fun romp, would be Art Brut and then Immortal Sergeant.
Right on. Well, that about sums it up for this week. To those people watching, please feel free to check out these comics. It's well worth all of them were good reads this week. And I anticipate that Jason and I will probably end up reviewing more indie comics in the weeks to follow. I know Jim doesn't always have time at Weird Science, and Jason, so we may have started something here, and I look forward to it. Hopefully, at some point in the future, you and I can get into an argument and disagree on something, and really get the drama.
I'm sure we'll get there. So, if folks want to hear me yak some more without having to see my face, you can check me over out on the Weird Science family of podcasts. I'm on the weekly Weird Dose of X, our X-Men podcast, and I'm also reviewing issue by issue the Reading Club for Death Note, one of the greatest mangas. He's one of the greatest shonen mangas ever written. Every week, Jim and I talk about that as well. So check me out there. And hey, if any of my math kids are watching me here on YouTube, go do your algebra homework.
Yeah, that's right. And people who watch my channel know that I review DC Comics every week. So does Weird Science. Jim and Eric at Weird Science review DC every week. Go check them out. I always listening to them every week. And, You can join the Get Fresh crew. You can go to Weird Science and you can join, and there's different tiers. You can pay $1 or $5 a month, or upwards of more if you like, and different kinds of perks as you get up there. So I would encourage people to do that.
Yep. Both of the podcasts I'm on happen to be free to everybody and worth every penny. So you can get all my stuff without having to pay. But for the high class stuff, the quality stuff, you got to shell out a little bit, which is only fair.
It's all good. All right. Well, thanks for joining me, Jason, and I'm sure it'll be the second of many. And until next time, Comic Boom and Weird Science. Jason out. Jason, you need a nickname or something, but I'll Comic Boom. But we'll touch base on that. Anyways, we are out of here.
Bye, everybody.